Welcome everyone to South Asia's regional workshop on air quality. My name is Nishan Dimel. I'm the Executive Director of Verité Research. And I want to introduce this two-day conference, which is hosted by Verité Research, together with the United States Department of State. We know that air pollution is a severe problem across South Asia. Air quality has deteriorated due to urbanization, traffic congestion, biomass burning, and heavy reliance on coal and fossil fuels. This impacts the environment, worsens public health, and compounds the problem of climate change. This is a regional issue that demands collaborative approach to be taken and knowledge sharing that can help generate workable solutions and positive results that benefit all of us. That then is the motivation for this two-day regional workshop. And our aim through these discussions is to develop pathways for dialogue, to promote knowledge sharing and professional networking across the region, to learn from the experiences of our neighboring countries, and address important gaps in the initiatives to improve air quality in South Asian countries. So for this purpose, this is a workshop that brings together selected air quality scientists, public health experts, communication professionals, and those working on public policy to share their knowledge and exchange experiences on air pollution. Before I introduce the first session and the first speaker, let me say something about Verité Research and a new initiative that we are taking on air quality. Verité Research is a public-facing think tank providing research and education in economics, media, governance, and law in Sri Lanka. The new initiative is that Verité at present, along with several private and public sector partners, is building Sri Lanka's first aggregate air quality data platform. The U.S. Embassy in many countries, including in Sri Lanka, has had a pioneering role in providing publicly accessible data on air quality from a sensor that is located within their embassy premises. Taking inspiration from that many years ago, you have seen efforts by governments and other actors, including Verité Research, to try and broaden the data and knowledge on air quality that is publicly available. So our attempt now in the platform that we are building is to create a single window of access to air quality data in Sri Lanka. And that will be launched in the next couple of months, and we'll let you know about it soon. So both of the first speakers on the first session, either individually or through their organizations, are contributing significantly to this air quality platform initiative. Now, we are going over 2 days, and let me just give you a big picture sense of what our 2 days will look like. We will discuss health and social impacts of poor air quality in the region. We will talk about strategies to communicate air quality information to the public. And we will discuss issues that need to be addressed in a regional context, not just a national context. And we will discuss needs and opportunities for joint collaborative research and action. The first session that is about to start now will have a focus on Sri Lanka's air quality and the most monitored pollutant when we talk about air quality worldwide is PM 2.5. Now, Ranil Damopala, the first speaker that I will introduce shortly, will explain the analysis conducted on PM 2.5 data collected in Sri Lanka and provide a South Asia regional comparison and show how low-cost sensors can be leveraged to expand air quality mapping. Sarath, who will speak after that, will explain in the National Bureau of Research, National NBRO, the Sri Lankan government organization, working on air quality, how they have developed low-cost sensors in-house and their deployment across Sri Lanka. So I think we're now ready to get into the first session. And let me say a few words about Ranil before I invite him to speak. Dr. Ranil Damopala is a senior meteorologist at the South Coast Air Quality Management District in Southern California. He is the Air Quality Fellow for the U.S. Embassy in Colombo, and for a long time, he has also been a research advisor to Verité Research. And he has, not just, while he works internationally now, he has a history of working in Sri Lanka in about 2 decades ago and developing air quality sensors and knowledge in Sri Lanka as well. He has over 25 years of technical experience in the field of air quality and holds a doctorate in atmospheric science from Washington State University in the USA. So Ranil will speak to us about Sri Lanka's air quality and the deployment of low-cost sensors. Ranil Damopala, thank you for joining us today to be the first speaker at the first session, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Nishan. Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here in a moment. Hopefully you can see that in full screen view.
Yes, Ranil, keep going.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so let's just jump into some of the basics of why we should care about air quality. Like Nishan mentioned, there are some basic reasons why it is important. To rehash a few things, South and Central Asia have, unfortunately, the not so noble distinction of having among the world's worst air quality. Now, that doesn't mean it's always bad, it's always terrible. But I'm sorry, was there a question there? Okay, sorry, go ahead. The problem with this is that there are a whole lot of negative health consequences with poor air quality. It's not just, not so nice to look at or affecting our view or something like that. There are some serious health consequences, and we have a special session dedicated to this to discuss these tomorrow. In Sri Lanka alone, there are about over 7,200 people who die every year from the adverse effects of air quality just in the country of Sri Lanka. Now, it's much worse in the neighboring countries where the population is larger, so and also, unfortunately, where pollution levels are higher. So this is not something to be taken lightly. And as Nishan mentioned, PM2.5 is the most monitored pollutant. And by the way, PM2.5 stands for particulate matter, PM, less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter. Let me just quickly show you this picture. By way of context, a human hair is much, much larger than PM2.5. It's not visible to the naked eye, generally produced from combustion and various processes that typically generate fine particles, combustion being the traffic combustion, biomass burning, all that stuff. And unfortunately, despite its health consequences and the fact that it's the most monitored pollutant, Sri Lanka didn't have a PM2.5 measuring station until pretty recently. It was the U.S. Embassy that installed one in 2017 and started reporting data to the public. There have been and still are various PM2.5 monitoring research studies, but unfortunately, the public doesn't get to see that data in near real time. The purpose of that is, if you know that it's bad right now, then you could take immediate steps to safeguard your health or ask questions about, should I go jogging this evening? Air quality is not good. Or is it okay to send my kids to sports practice and things like that? But without that information, you cannot make those decisions like on a near real-time basis. All right, so at least for Colombo, some of the main sources of PM2.5 are traffic, and this includes road dust. And about a decade ago, there was an estimate by the Ministry of Environment of how much each source category contributes to total PM2.5. It's about 60%. And industrial activities, which includes power plants, the diesel-fired and the coal-fired, everything, about 25%, and then domestic fuel, as in garbage burning, as well as mostly cooking, about 15%. Now, this is specific to Colombo, and these estimates are a decade old. I don't know how much things would have changed since, but it is very likely that these main source categories are still very important. Even if the exact numbers are not so accurate today. So I was among, I guess, several other people who have analyzed the PM2.5 data collected by the U.S. Embassy monitor in Colombo. And, taking a rather high-level view of it, this is a plot that shows you how it varies through the year. Now, in different months, so the green is good air quality, moderate is yellow, USG stands for unhealthy for sensitive groups, and then unhealthy for everybody, even healthy people who don't have any ongoing underlying health complications. So you can see straight off which months are the cleanest in the year, the middle of the year, during the southwest monsoon, basically. And then once you transition to the northeast monsoon, November, December, January, February, you start getting poorer air. And there are several reasons for this, which I'll get into in a bit. So in terms of the how do things change throughout the day, it's called the Diurnal Pattern. November to February, we can see, let's not worry about the details here, what exactly is on this y-axis, but November to February, you can see that, during the morning rush hour, there is a spike. And then it drops, it cleans out during the day. There's a meteorological reason for this. And then again in the evening, once the rush hour spike is over, at night, domestic emissions and also poor dispersion work towards resulting poor air quality. Now, over weekends, you don't have those rush hour spikes, certainly not the morning rush hour spike. So it's a little cleaner over the weekends. And then the other months of the year, you can see the same pattern, but at a lower level. All right, I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but in terms of the variations daily, I just wanted to quickly explain some of those meteorological factors to you. And in my opinion, this one picture I took a few years ago in the Kathmandu Valley has air pollution meteorology 101 in one picture. So this was taken rather early in the morning, well, 7:30 a.m. And if you look closely, you will see that these are actually brick kilns, all these little sources of smoke. Smoke is rising up to about that height and no further. All right. Now, if you came back like around 10 a.m. or noon, you would probably not see this height distinction at all. It might be much higher, or you might not see it at all. Basically, what's happening is that overnight pollution is trapped in this lower layer, or this shallow layer, and just accumulates within like a valley community. And it's not just in valleys, it's everywhere. It's just very pronounced and visible in a situation like this. But everywhere, pollution is trapped closer to the ground at night when there is no solar heating. But as the solar heating kicks in, as the ground warms up, it's able to disperse through a deeper layer and reduce in concentrations, which is why you see those drops in concentration around midday into the afternoon. All right, another quick plot of, this is called a pollution rose, again broken out on the left-hand panel by November to February, and then the rest of the year on the right-hand side. This is showing you the wind directions associated with different levels of air pollution. All right, so very quickly, November to February, northeast monsoon, most of the high pollution, the orange and the red, is associated with those winds blowing from the northeast. Now, it's not that there aren't high pollution levels from the other wind directions. It's not just northeast winds. Northeast winds, like the monsoon implies, often bring air masses from some of our neighboring countries here. So it's often the case where you do get long-range transport from neighboring countries, but these other wind directions, not as many, not as frequent, but they're still there. Those are often associated with light winds, basically our own local pollution accumulating when the meteorological conditions don't favor dispersion. So yeah, it's one of those situations where sometimes you get to point fingers at your neighbors, but other times you've got to take responsibility. Of course, in the southwest monsoon, things are much clearer because you've got mostly clean air off the Indian Ocean blowing into the country, and it's generally good 2 categories cleaner. All right, so this is just Colombo. I just wanted to show you the comparison with all the regional embassies. And this is a quick map plot of how the last 3 years of data, and I calculated the 98th percentile, basically the 2% of, put it like this. 7 days every year are excluded. The 7 highest days every year are excluded from this calculation. It's the way the U.S. Regulates air quality on a daily average basis. And that's not necessarily how each of these countries regulate it. Each one has their own formulae. But just to be on the same page, I just used the U.S. calculation. And these are the numbers, and you can see, yeah, Colombo is certainly not the worst, but with a 98th percentile of 64 micrograms per cubic meter. I should also mention that the US standard is 35, and the WHO standard is 25. So several times the US or the WHO standard, even though Colombo is one of the cleaner of the embassies in the region. The other question some of you might have is, how representative are these embassy locations? I mean, after all, embassies are not located in like the most polluted neighborhoods in whichever city. But there was a recent research paper out of India to show how the levels measured at all those 5 embassies in India compared pretty well against other government-run monitors located in and around those same cities. So it is pretty representative. It's not in the super clean microcosm or anything like that. They are, for the most part, exposed to the same kind of air that the rest of the population in those same cities are exposed to. All right. All right. So now we've only got data for Colombo. And what about the rest of Sri Lanka? Well, these monitors, unfortunately, the one such as the one operated at the embassy, they're not cheap. All right, about $25,000 each just to buy, and then there's specialized parts and all that servicing costs to operate it. But in say the last 5 to no more than 10 years, there are sensors essentially called low-cost sensors, as the name implies, that have been proliferating like crazy. Lots of people using it to measure air quality, citizen scientists chipping in because they just cost a few $100s, some of them a little more than that. But it's one of those things. I've had so many of my friends here gifting one of these devices to a family member for like a Christmas present, for instance. And well, there's 2 things to it that you need to pay attention to. As the name implies, low cost, and obviously there's only so much the $300 piece of equipment can do compared to a $25,000 piece of equipment. So if they are to be used as alternatives, they first have to be calibrated. And the way we do this is by running them alongside each other for some time, developing some formulae to correct the data out of the low-cost sensors, and then deploy the low-cost sensor to a new location, but make sure its data are corrected with those formula that you just developed. Again, for the most part, the low-cost sensors have been developed and improved only for PM2.5 measurements. There are a few for other pollutants, but they're just not as widespread. All right, so there was a study, and Sarat will talk more about work that he's also doing alongside the embassy monitor, where these sensors are operated for some time. That's the picture of the embassy monitor. That's one of those low-cost sensors. It's something that you can fit on your palm, maybe a little bigger than that. And this is a comparison of the data. So this Atmos sensor is something that Verité bought and ran alongside the embassy monitor. This picture is one of it's a model called Purple Air, and that's just another brand name. All right. So what you're looking at here is a plot of the raw data, the black what's that? Black diamonds here. And on the y-axis, it's the embassy monitor. So the objective of developing these calibration factors is to take this set of data, the raw data, and transform it as close to the one-to-one line as possible. All right, now in this plot, I've tested various different statistical models to achieve that. And then in a paper that's just been accepted for publication, we discuss how we pick the best performing statistical model. But once you have those, you can apply those factors, the calibration factors, to any other purple air sensor that's operating in the country. And at this point, there were, I think we found 6 devices around the country that had run at different times. So we were able to pull the data and apply these correction factors. I'm not going into all the patterns here, but you can see I'll show you the locations here on a map in a moment. One little thing I wanted to point out was this monitor in Jayawardenegama, close to Battaramulla in the administrative capital of Sri Lanka. Every other monitor drops down during the daytime hours. All right, this one, not as much. And one reason for that is it's close to a street, like a busy street, and there's a bunch of, I think, few kindergarten or Montessori schools around there. So that midday traffic is also measurable. It's not as high as the other traffic spikes, and that's because of favorable meteorological dispersion, but you can see the signal. Anyway, what I wanted to show you was that once you are able to apply these correction factors to these existing sensors or new sensors that you've deployed around the country, you can, and this is a multi-step process, I'm not going into detail, but you can use satellite data as well as some model data to basically map pollution around the whole country. These pie charts are the locations of the different monitors that we have available. We don't have coverage all over the country, but the use of satellites don't measure PM 2.5 directly. So they need ground-based monitors to do some kind of ground truthing, so to speak. And that's the purpose of these adjusted monitors. So yeah, I'm not going into details how these were derived, but at least here you could now map PM 2.5 in the whole country, starting with that one monitor, adding on some low-cost sensors, deploying them around the country. And Sarat is going to be talking about a much wider network of some of these low-cost sensors, which will only help to refine these spatial estimates around the country. So that's all I have for now. I think the questions are going to be held to the end. So I will stop screen sharing and turn it over to Sarat.
Ranil, I will take over just before Sarat comes in to introduce Sarat. Thank you very much. I think Ranil gave us a fairly comprehensive analysis of how techniques are being developed and the initiatives that are being taken to research, understand, and also better monitor air quality in Sri Lanka. It's an important initiative going forward. Before we get into discussions and conversations on what Ranil presented, let me introduce our next speaker, who's going to talk about the challenges of deploying real-time sensors and the techniques of measurement and assessment of air quality on a real-time basis that has to be done to engage the public and also create a better data set for researchers going forward in the future. Our speaker is Mr. Sarat Premasiri. He is a senior scientist at the National Building Research Organization, NBRO, the acronym I used earlier. He's also the director of the Environmental Studies and Services Division in the NBRO, and he received his Bachelor of Science special degree for chemistry and his MPhil in chemical science from the University of Peradeniya. He also holds a postgraduate diploma in environmental management from the University of Moratuwa. So Mr. Premasiri's interests are in environmental management, air quality management, and noise pollution control and management as well. And together with his colleagues at NBRO, he has developed air quality monitoring, what's called a passive sampler technique, which is a novel sensor-based equipment that is used to monitor air quality in Sri Lanka. He has contributed to air quality management in Sri Lanka in many ways. He serves as a committee member in the National Air Quality Management Committee, and Mr. Premasiri has published more than 60 research articles and papers in national and international journals and symposiums. Mr. Premasiri, I want to thank you also, in addition to being present here, for your engagement with Verité in the platforms we are building for sharing data on air quality, and for the enormous service that you've done to the country in air quality management and developing techniques. So let me invite you now to speak about the real-time measurement techniques for air quality in Sri Lanka. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Han. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. Thank you, and
slides as well.
all are welcome to these sessions as well. Actually speaking, in the National Research Organization, my organization, we have an experience of about 30 years in air quality monitoring in Sri Lanka. And also, I'm proud to say that the National Building Research Organization, that's NBRO, is the main organization that have conduct continuously air quality monitoring programs in Sri Lanka. With that, I will come to my topic, the application of the real-time sensor technique for air quality monitoring in Sri Lanka. As we know, the air quality monitoring is one of the major section in air quality management. We have to have good database in air quality data for the management activities to make use. So if we think about the Sri Lankan conditions, we have started air quality monitoring, continuous air quality monitoring in Sri Lanka more than 35 years ago, but the confidential set of monitoring is started in 1997 with 3 automated air quality monitoring units, which can measure sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, especially PM10, and other pollutants as well as meteorological conditions. Those 2 units, we had actually 3 units of automated air quality monitoring. 2 have installed in Colombo. One is peak location as well as in as a second one is as a background location. But then we had another mobile station to study other areas in the country. Unfortunately, this program has been ended up in 2005 due to some problems with the equipments and unavailability of spare parts for that type of mode of the air quality. Actually, speaking that this is one of the best monitoring program have in South Asian countries in those days. Then after we have developed passive sampling monitoring technique in Sri Lanka. Initially in Colombo, we cover the passive sampling, use sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide monitoring in Colombo in 2002 and up to 2012. Then after expand from 2012 to 2019 in 10 urban areas in Sri Lanka. Both this technique actually the automated monitoring, although it is automated monitoring station which collect data, real-time data, but at that time there was no any facilities available to disseminate this data to general public awareness, and also the we had not software like now available site apps and the mobile apps or any other software. Therefore, the data is, we have to go to the site and collect data to download data and analyze. Therefore, there's no any information to the public on this data except we are publishing data in newspaper and other media. But the passive sampling, it is not short-term data. We can get only long-term data as an monthly average like those things. But data have been used to develop the air quality management system in Sri Lanka as well as some health studies. Then, as Dr. Ranil said that the real-time monitoring is started in 2017, around 2017 at the U.S. Embassy with the BAM monitoring system, particulate matter. And then after in 2018 and somewhere else, there are some real-time monitoring systems in the market. We have bring them in Sri Lanka, and actually we have taken this as a NBRO. We have started with 3 units of these monitoring stations, which come real-time air quality, and there are some other parties who involved in air quality monitoring in some Colombo and Kandy, etc. They have installed their sensors. With these sensors, real-time sensors, we have observed a lot of things actually, which we not observe early, because these are real-time data which can come to our mobile as well through the mobile apps and connected to the international website or international parties and get this data. So that we have observed that in particular days we have high level of pollutions in city, and some hours, maybe some days existing these high levels with these systems. So that again it have been demonstrated that the wind pattern of the country has affected this situation, as well as the vehicular fleet in the roads and all those things we have observed through these systems. And also we have earlier we had some vicinity problems, but we didn't understand this is because of this air pollution condition. With this sensor, introducing of these sensor units, we have seen that once the vicinity of the Colombo area or maybe other areas is reduced, this is mainly due to the high air pollution levels that we observe. So this type of information we observe through this monitoring system of the when we are using this low cost technique, which data comes to our mobile phones through the mobile apps like that, and we have all over the country get the attention to this change of air pollution as well as visibility reduction, and sometimes the levels are so far higher than the uh, national standard as well as WHO standard. So we therefore we think to develop this type of sensor technique in incorporate this type of sensor technique in our monitoring system. But there are some problems, as Mr. Ranil said, that we have to calibrate these things, and sometime in market sensors available market we cannot calibrate directly or adjust directly the values or some software, but what we have to do is introduce some factor as he explained. But the with that problems, we thought to do some our own sensor technique to develop, which we can overcome some of these problems. So Dr. Ajit Kadwala, he is one of the expert in air quality in California, who help us to do this development. He has trained our staff, and we have used some parts of the computer parts, mini computer parts and sensors which available in market, and connected those things and developed some kind of sensor in own sensor. And once we develop this, we observe that it is difficult to place these samples in ambient air quality monitoring surrounding area. So we develop some outer cell or as well for this one to measure ambient air quality. So this type of sensors we can make use indoor air quality monitoring as well as outdoor with these outer cells. Then we have get the problem how we need to calibrate these things or validate our data sensors. So we had at that time a BAM monitoring system with automated air quality monitoring units. 3 units are at the moment in Sri Lanka. So one is with us, other two is operated by was operating by Central Environment Authority. So we run these two BAM standard method and our sensor unit at same place and same height and same environment conditions with these enclosure systems and all those things to validate this data, whether we can observe similar data. So we have done some modifications to the outer cells as well as the sensor cover to obtain good database. So we have validate these real time sensors, and we see that these data observed will match with the statistical techniques, and within the 5% significant levels, and the data set, two data set, there is no difference between two data set which we develop by our sensor, especially with this outer cover and these sensors. So then we observe this kind of sensors can be make use in our system with this standard. So any sensor assembled by ourselves, we are running validation time period with the BAM system, standard system, and get this verification. After verification, we apply this into the monitoring station. Initially, we have developed 5 locations, one Colombo, Anuradhapura, Vavuniya, Kurunegala, and Jaffna, because we have selected these locations at the period of this monitoring. This area are the main area affected by our wind pattern in air pollution with respect to the air pollution. Therefore, we have selected this location and installed our monitoring system. In addition, we propose to install this monitoring location in other areas as well. But once we are developing this network, we need to have some kind of software to collect data and disseminate data or store data in all these sensors. So we have developed the IoT-based real-time platform to collect data with the help of Veritas and Veritas Research, and also this data base or this platform collect all this data and store in our database with quality control techniques. And now all units are connected to our data platform, and all data are stored in our cloud system, and we can obtain quality control database with our this system. Once this system is
just to tell you, 1 minute left.
We have improved our monitoring network with, at the moment, we have 20 sensor-based monitoring station, each in district-based urban area in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, we have 25 districts, but at the moment we have covered 20 monitoring, 20 district centers. But with the help of the Veritas, we have covered the other 5 districts as well and nearby. With this sensor system, now we have 3 automated air quality monitoring units at Colombo Municipal Council, one operated by NBRO, then 2 other Central Environmental Authority operated at Battaramulla and Kandy. Since our system at Colombo Municipal Council is a mobile system, so we can make use it for to go other areas and as a to measure air quality for the verification process of this sensor network.
Mr. Sarath Prebasiri,
we are about to come to the end of this session. Sri Lanka is subject to very different the wind patterns, especially in surrounding wind as well as some local wind patterns, depending on the wind direction. Those wind patterns consider the actually highly depend. The air quality is highly depend on these wind patterns, and these are some wind patterns and air quality levels which we got from international website, and we see this difference in this website publication as well as we see the same trend and trend patterns we can observe through this our monitoring network as well. So these those prediction levels and our monitoring networks are going properly in match with these pollution levels in within different environment conditions and different wind patterns. And in future, we as I told you, we will go to develop this sensor network in to all 25 districts and some other locations which is important in urban areas, and also we will cover the rural areas as well. Since we have this database, then we can get all a map of air quality in all other areas using this technique, and while validating data with reference levels, reference station. At the moment, we are disseminate this data through online platform, and we are publishing daily reports in website to get aware the public and who interest in air quality. And also we have some digital displays. We are publishing this data in digital displays as well, and also we are giving this data to other researchers who need to do their research as well as for policy development and development air quality management activities in Sri Lanka. So that is our sensor application in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much. And you can go to the to can obtain or see our data in aqnbro.gov.telco website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Premasiri. It's very impressive, the work that's been done by people like Mr. Premasiri and others at NBRO, and this has allowed Verité, alongside other organizations, to come and build something even more widespread in the country. Now, as we get into the question session, I want to just let you know how you can ask questions and engage with this session. You can, as you can see in the chat, if you go to the chat, instructions are given. You can type your questions in the chat and they will come to me. But also, if you want to just unmute and speak and ask your questions, you can put a raise your hand sign. And when you put a raise your hand sign, we will take note of the people who've raised their hands. And then I can come back to you towards the end and ask you to ask your question. So let me jump in for the first question for Ranil Damopala. Ranil, you talked about the challenge of measuring accurately and measuring well, but also the opportunities for doing that. There were high-grade sensors, but there were low-cost sensors, but there was also satellites that can be used. So can you just help us understand, can't we replace all this sensor network with satellites? Why or why not? And what is the complementarity between satellite-based measurement and air quality sensors that are on the ground, as it were? Go ahead.
Very good question. The limitation with satellites is that we still don't have a way of measuring pollutants directly at ground level. Satellites are only flying overhead a few times a day at most, so it's a snapshot. Usually they pass over Colombo, most places in South Asia around 10:30 a.m. local time, and then again at 1:30 p.m. local time. But they're only seeing the entire column, looking down the whole atmosphere, top to bottom. They don't know how much is at the bottom, how much is at the top. It's not able to decipher that yet. So it's only a ground-based monitor that can tell what people are exposed to. So there are various mathematical techniques that convert those satellite observations, even though it's once a day or a couple of times a day, to match the ground-based sensors. Now, that's not a simple technique, and those relationships change from location to location, season to season, and that's why satellite observations have to be taken with a grain of salt. They are incredibly useful because you got coverage absolutely everywhere, but they're also susceptible to cloud cover. And then the problems that I've described. So it's a work in progress. One fine day, hopefully in the not too distant future, we will see them taking care of, measuring all pollutants everywhere. But that's still a pipe dream.
Thank you very much. So here's a question. I think that can work for both Ranil and Sarath in a way. We know that there have been independent initiatives for air quality monitoring. So there are different organizations, sometimes individuals, as Ranil said, well, in the US, people get it as birthday presents, who might set up a low-cost sensor and monitor air quality. And some of these people actually make that data also available in separate silos, okay? Ranil, what is the challenge, and Sarath, what is the challenge when different people are using low-cost sensors? I think both of you all talked about the challenge of calibration. So that you have a measurement that is comparable across the board. Can you help us understand that why it is important perhaps to bring all these sensors into one platform or one calibration? Is it important? Or can we let 1,000 flowers bloom and have everybody do their monitoring data and separately publish them? What are the pros and the cons of those two approaches?
Sarath, you want me to answer that first and you can follow up?
Okay. Actually, in Sri Lanka, there are a lot of there are few agencies, maybe not a lot of few agencies, maybe less than 10 agencies, and the private individuals have these type of sensor units. So yes, we have some problems with this data because the accuracy or maybe the validation of data in most of these, we have not checked the validation of data. As Dr. Ranil said that we need to validate and through a maybe factor or maybe some kind of important. So we have to do it. That's why we need to have one platform to collect all these things and to the validation. Then there is another problem what we have seen, that the installation of these or the location of installation these sensors. Some sensors are installed in sometime inside the building, and they are used for the monitoring of the indoor air quality, but they are providing data to international level connected to the international platforms. So the levels are setting as the high levels due to this location of the interest. So we have to follow the guidelines of the monitoring guideline. If we are using these thing ambient air quality monitoring, so we have to install our sensors or the with the normal guideline where the location selection guideline we have to apply. It may be use WHO guidelines or US EPA guidelines to select the best location if you are using the outdoor monitoring. And indoor monitoring can be used for their own interest, and if it is good, if they are in the indoor, then we have to don't connect. We do not connect it to the international these platforms, because sometimes they are understanding it as the outdoor levels and give high levels like that. Those are some problems we face. So at the moment also we are talking about this system, because since this sensor technique is worldwide using as well as it was not yet identified as a standard method. So therefore we have to go with these things with reference almost with the reference monitoring station or with their standard techniques. So we are also in Sri Lanka, Environment Ministry and the Central Environmental Authority and all other stakeholders are talking about them, and to come to some kind of platform, same platform to once we disseminate this data.
Thank you, sir. That was a very comprehensive answer. Ranil, is there anything you want to add to that briefly? Before we get on to
very
any others?
briefly, unfortunately, people have these very different types of sensors all over the place, and there is no single or universally applicable calibration factor where you run them all through the same formula and then you get good quality data. That just doesn't happen. So each type of device has to be calibrated in kind of the local environment that you plan to use it. So even if some calibration factors were developed in the US, it doesn't mean you can just pluck it out and assume that it works in Sri Lanka. So those are some of the challenges. So you can certainly open it up to the public, but each type of sensor that's being telemetered to some kind of central database needs to have been validated, calibrated, and quality controlled according to some of the pitfalls that Sarat just described.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that's really the motivation behind the air quality platform that Verité is building in collaboration with NBRO and several private sector and government organizations, because then there is a way of making the data that is coming out from all the sensors in the country comparable at a high standard of accuracy, reliability, and also enables people to have a single window to be able to understand air quality in the country. Now, I want to mention, before we go on to a couple of other questions, one of the technologies that have been so very important in enabling this process, because what NBRO is doing, and we have seen that they have got real-time data now. So there is, of course, a technology that is deployed in getting that sensor data to be real-time. There are applications that need to be built and integrated into the systems that we have. And the game-changing sort of ability to do that has really come from an organization called Integra, headed by Sumedha Rubasinghe, who I've noticed is in the audience. So I thought maybe Sumedha, I can sort of, just jump to you from the audience, if you don't mind, and ask you to tell us about this technology, how you've deployed it, and how that has changed the possibilities and the outcomes for air quality measurement in Sri Lanka, real-time measurement. Over to you. Just check with
Yeah, thanks, Nishan. So in this particular situation, what we have identified is, if any organization wants to build up a geographically distributed sensor network, connecting all that into a centralized computing environment is a challenge faced by anyone. Okay? So that is actually the problem that we have helped to solve for NBRO here. And while doing so, we have also helped on the aspect of some part of the calibration that Dr. Ranil mentioned, because now we are connecting different types of sensors and bringing all that raw data into a centralized environment where certain type of adjustments can also happen. That's one thing. And the second thing is we also provide technology where this data can be easily consumed or shared with anyone who's interested in using that. So that's basically what we are doing. And this also has the ability of connecting different types of sensors, so that regardless of how complicated the sensor equipment is, we can still write a small adapter or a connector and connect different types of sensors, so that there's a single place or a platform to access and view this data.
Thank you very much, Sumedha, and thank you for your partnership with Verité, with NBRO, in building out this technology and deploying it. I think it is a totally Sri Lankan company that has come out and shown that they can develop the highest quality of technology interventions to solve very important problems like this. Ranil and Sarat, I want to ask a separate question. The reason this is a regional workshop is because, air quality and the movement of air doesn't respect national boundaries, right? And the air quality in one place can be affected by the air quality in the other. Can you help us understand what are the intersections or interconnections between, say, air quality in India, air quality in Sri Lanka, between the South Asian countries? To what extent does the air quality in one place affect the other, and what are the ways of thinking about how countries cooperate to understand and mitigate the consequences they have on each other?
Okay, let me take a crack at that. For one, this can be a politically contentious topic because there's the blame game. But I mean, weather patterns are weather patterns, like it or not. There is going to be transport of pollutants from one place to another. And there are sophisticated tools that show you roughly where things come from. I mentioned that there was a paper that we published recently, or just been accepted for publication, and we show in that how during certain seasons, there is a substantial amount of Sri Lanka's pollution that does come from parts of India and Bangladesh. But that's not all that makes it to Sri Lanka. There are high polluted days in Sri Lanka that aren't due to transboundary pollution. The same applies, the same general logic applies everywhere. And I know in the two provinces of Punjab, this can get contentious, but they do have movement across the borders a lot. And there's always the question of who's making it harder for us to pollute, to breathe, or to comply with standards. And if not for the other guy, then we'd be doing a lot better. There's always that going on. Yeah. But
Ranil,
air pollution, unfortunately, is mostly controlled by those terrain features, the geography, and the emissions are obviously a big part of it, but the wind flows and the geography does play a huge role. I don't know if Sarat has anything to add.
Let me move us a little bit forward so that Sarat can come into a separate part of the question. Verité published some months ago a paper, an insight titled "The COVID Cleanup of Colombo Air Quality," okay, where we noticed that the COVID period saw a marked reduction in poor air quality, especially during traffic periods, so that the reduction in traffic during the COVID lockdown periods seemed to be correlated with reductions in bad air quality that was there, especially during that time. So the question really I have is, do we have an understanding, Sarat, of what are the contributors for poor air quality in Sri Lanka? And I want you to go on from that to talk about measures for mitigating or improving air quality in Sri Lanka. Now, NBRO has started on this measurement process. Is there thinking that is happening about how to actually reduce negative impacts and improve air quality as well? But start with maybe what we know about what are the main causes for poor or weak reducing air quality in Colombo and the rest of Sri Lanka.
Okay, actually, I start with your early question because once we add something into our atmosphere, it is not remain at that point. It will goes with the wind, or maybe in our Earth also always rotating. So with that, it maybe goes to other areas as well. Once we are able to add to something to the atmosphere, so you can see that that is the transboundary impact what we are talking about. And also we know in this period we have discussed, this is in I think 2 decades ago or something, Asian brown cloud. Yes, it is still there. If you go to any website or any air quality modeling, the website, air quality displaying website, you can see in these days the entire area is red in color, because of this high polluting air in our atmosphere, right? And also, if we are thinking about now, we are going to what I give this into all scientists who listen this one. You can see all this air pollution layer is in around the equatorial. If you think about that, it is not at the Asian region, it goes to other areas as well along the equatorial. I think it is merely because of this our rotating system of the earth. Maybe it will go through other areas as well. All these data are showing in website. It is the understanding what that I got. And in Sri Lankan condition, yes, we have a lot of several pollution sources. Mainly, as Dr. Ranil said, that vehicles are the highest contributor. It is more than 60%. And there are some domestic contribution, and industrial contribution is somewhat less because except the power plants, other industries, power plant and the metal industries, other industries are some low polluting industry that we have in Sri Lanka. So the power, thermal power production, we have some contributions, and also the open burning is the third or fourth one contribute to in most of urban areas this air pollution. Once this situation we have seen during the COVID period, actually within 1 day, with the COVID curfew, within 1 day air pollution level has reduced by 70 to 60% of within 1 day, reduce it, and remain at the lower level during the curfew period, because during the curfew period all these sources are somewhat shut off, especially vehicles are not moving in the road. So, and also some industries have been closed and all these things, but the domestic and power plant emissions are contributed, but the pollution levels, actually we have seen 70% reduction during this curfew period. Then after removing curfew, and we have removed the curfew time to time, which is not suddenly removed, and some lockdowns are there. So the pollutant levels are almost increased with the vehicular population who come to the urban area. Those data are really shows that the vehicles in urban area, main polluter is the vehicles, and with some contribution for background contribution from domestic and the power plants, etc. But the mainly contributing vehicles. So that still actually we are below the 2021. 2021 is below the 2020 and 2019, because still 2019, because only the vehicles for school transport have started last month. Totally started last month.
Sarath,
So
I've been asking.
I will say just wait. Then we have problem with transbound contribution during the period of northeast monsoon, that is from November to March. Actually, those period we have contribution from the transboundary, especially winds are coming from the northeast direction. We had some transboundary pollution as well as a main source.
Sarath, you talked about the fact that vehicles are the ones that have the biggest impact with regard to air quality, and I've been asking these questions that are coming from the audience, though I've been phrasing it slightly differently. There was another question about the regulation of, say, BOI zones or industries, on the basis that the polluter pays principle. how does Sri Lanka, what are the policies or systems in place in Sri Lanka to ensure that particular industry doesn't over-pollute, or that pollution is measured and regulated at the production sites or zones? And maybe, Sarath, you can quickly say whether there is something in place, and maybe Ranil can give a sense of what is the global approach on that. We have only a very few minutes, so if you can keep your answers very brief to maybe 25, 30 seconds,
Okay,
and we'll move
actually,
on.
our standard, National Ambient Air Quality Standards, was introduced in around 2006 and 1996, and then review in 2008 as well. One is the regulation made for the air quality management. Then actually, as we thought that the vehicular emissions are the main sources of air pollution in Sri Lanka, we have given the standard for vehicular emissions and vehicular emission testing program. It is implemented in Sri Lanka in 2008 and onward in other areas with the Environment Ministry and Central Environment Authority as well as Transport Ministry. We have cluster of organization into one umbrella is rolled under Environment Ministry AMAC. So we discuss these things and implement these vehicular emission testing programs and testing standard, and then review all those things. And also I want to say this, most of people, they are thinking about this vehicular emission testing program is not effective. Maybe not fully effective, but if we consider the air quality side, it has reduced, once we introduce vehicular emission testing program, it is effective to reduce 30 to 40% of air pollution in Colombo and other urban areas. There is an impact due to these vehicles. Then after with the industries, it has been introduced the industrial emission standard, so point source emission standard in 2019, I think, 19. But still we have, earlier we have used some kind of interim standard, but it is regulated in 2019 and now in implementation in the industrial part. And also there are some other regulations, banding, open burning and all other things to manage air quality. There are, in time to time, we are taking some step with the, especially Environment Ministry and the Central Environment Authority and other organization. We are discussing all these things with this data, and improvement are going on. We have some kind of action plan. We are calling about the as a baseline. We are calling about 2000. Now it is a Clean Air Action 2025 is there. Now we are in that position implementing these guidelines, but there are some delays in applying these conditions due to some lot of some other reasons. But we are in the track of reducing these management systems as well introduced.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sarath. Ranil, we are out of time, so I'm not going to come back to you. I'm just going to wrap up very quickly before we take a 5-minute coffee break. But if there's any burning issue you want to come in on, feel free to come in soon after that. This first session has really been about Sri Lankan air quality. And the problem of measurement, the importance of data. And we believe that the data, getting the measurement right, understanding the problem correctly, having data that is publicly accessible, that builds social, political understanding, and builds then also analytical research understanding, is a very important baseline for the actions that are taken to improve air quality going forward. So we know that Sri Lanka's air quality problem is not the worst in South Asia, but it is probably not prudent to wait till a problem gets extremely acute in order to start addressing it. We know from many other spheres of the economy that when you wait too long, the problem becomes harder to solve. So this is really a proactive, preemptive initiative to make sure that Sri Lanka understands air quality better and it brings together all the actors, the systems, the technologies that exist to measure, evaluate, and take proactive steps to improve and keep a reasonably good air quality in Sri Lanka. And I think you have understood through this session that it is not simply a matter of deploying sensors, that they have to be calibrated, they have to be adjusted. You have to mix high-grade sensors with low-cost sensors to make sure that the calibration works accurately. That data also has to be analyzed and understood. And then policies have to be developed and implemented to make sure that the air quality knowledge we have feeds back into mitigation measures appropriately. Now, the event that we are having over these 2 days is meant to cover many of those aspects. We started with the challenge of air quality data and good data and the measurement problems and developments and initiatives in Sri Lanka. The air quality platform that we are building together with NBRO and several private sector organizations, we have and government, so we have Mitsubishi Corporation, we have the Canadian government as well, contributing to this platform, is meant to really start that solution process. Now, if you want to get air quality alerts when the platform is up and running, a link will be shared right now where you can sign up right now. So when the platform is up, we'll give you an alert and an advance notice. And you can also get alerts if you have your location on the quality of air in your location and when it gets to be poor or negative. And that's a way of keeping updated with air quality, and you will see those come to you in the next couple of months. The second session for the day is based on a Duke University in the US, has a program for all of South Asia to support and enable the improvement of air quality in South Asia. And I think we will see people speaking from within at the deployment of that program, to understand how initiatives are being taken, not only in Sri Lanka, but also in South Asia. And that will be after the coffee break, which will go on for another 3 or 4 minutes. And we welcome you to take a break and come back and stay with us in today's program. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you had a good coffee break. I just wanted to quickly introduce the second session to you. So in this session, we have 3 speakers. And the first, Dr. Mike Bergin from Duke University, Professor Gaussian from the University of Pennsylvania, and Dr. Faheem Kokar from Pakistan. I will introduce them in more detail in a moment, but just a quick overview of what this session is about. So session number 2, and we're going to be focusing on air pollution monitoring in Sri Lanka and building capacity to improve air quality in South Asia. Professor Mike Bergin will be focusing on a project that is underway in several South Asian countries aimed at reducing PM2.5 to more healthy levels in highly polluted regions in each country through a combination of low-cost satellite images, low-cost sensors, satellite images, and enhanced PM2.5 sensor networks integrated with meteorological modeling to determine local versus regional sources of PM. Dr. Gaussian will come in afterwards and talk about monitoring and modeling of PM2.5 in Sri Lanka using a small sensor network. And further, Professor Mohammad Faheem Kokar will talk about the role and challenges of low-cost sensors in air pollution scenarios of Pakistan. So thank you to each of our speakers for being willing. And Mike, I know it's not a pleasant hour for you, so thank you for being willing. I'd like to start by introducing Mike, tell you a little about him. Mike Bergin is the Sternberg Family Chair and Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Duke University. Prior to coming to Duke, he was a professor of environmental engineering and earth and atmospheric sciences at Georgia Tech. Dr. Bergin's general research focus is on the influence of air pollution on both climate change and human health. His specific interests is particulate matter, which you heard us referring to as PM, and he has done a wide range of studies on the emissions, formation, deposition, and impacts of PM. He's particularly interested in how PM impacts climate by modifying the radiation balance of the atmosphere, and he has conducted studies in Greenland and the Himalayas, as well as China and India. Most recently, he has been studying the influence of PM on human health, with emphasis on determining the relative contributions of sources such as biomass burning and vehicular emissions on acute health impacts. He's also involved in developing the next generation of air quality sensors to inform citizens on the quality of air they breathe so that they can make informed decisions to improve their air. His vision involves combining a multidisciplinary, multicultural approach to research and education that brings together researchers from around the world to collectively work together to make the air cleaner. So without any further ado, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Oh.
Not now.
Oh. Not now?
You can see now.
Okay. Shoot,
Yeah.
close your eyes, everybody. Okay, are we ready? How do we look?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about a project today that is funded by the State Department and is to build capacity in South Asia. And I'll just say real quick, there's several countries involved, 7. And as you see, it's India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Bhutan, and Pakistan. And after I talk, you'll hear both Gaussian and Faheem talk, and they're project members from 2 of our partner countries. And I'd also like to, before I get going, thank Ashani and Darini for doing such a great job with logistics and support, and of course Ranil for inviting me, and Nishan as well. So just the big picture view of this might be a trace of the air quality, or PM 2.5, and this might have been, say, Los Angeles 60 years ago until the present. And these are several of our countries, and you see typically what we'd really like to do is we'd like to take our hindsight view in the United States of trying to make the air better and apply at least some of what we learned to some of our partner countries. And as you can see, there's countries ranging from Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan who have not so terrible air quality now, really, compared to places like Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So the idea is to try to make the air better in these places and use some of what we've learned already if it's applicable. And one thing I'd like to say, and this is just a couple slides of overview, is at the moment sort of a big gap or a big hurdle exists to get over, and that's information, the technology to teach us that information, which in this case is air quality and particulate matter concentrations, and then particularly planning to lower those the air quality in these regions. And one thing that we're going to do in our project, and you heard about this already, and really interestingly, Ranil talked about satellites, I'll mention that, and we'd like to drop this barrier down so that at the end, the project will diminish these 3 barriers so that something what will look like in the end is no barrier to understanding this information about particulate matter and the spatial distribution of particulate matter and the health impacts. And so we won't be able to say by the end of the project that in these countries that we don't have the right information to start to understand the air pollution problem and its health impacts. And I think today what I heard was fantastic. I think Sri Lanka seems in many ways like it's far ahead of many other countries and starting to learn more about PM 2.5, particularly through the low-cost sensors. Okay, so again, I'll restate the objectives. We're going to put PM 2.5 sensor networks in several countries. We're going to integrate that with satellite imagery. I'll talk more about that to really better understand not just the PM 2.5 concentrations, but the sources and source regions of those PM 2.5 concentrations. And one thing that was also mentioned today by Sarat was implementing and using meteorology and combined with the PM 2.5, and that's an incredibly powerful tool. I'll mention that. And of course, for us, it's trying to develop very, very careful connections with local government and non-governmental partners. And this is done, a great deal of this is done through choosing fantastic partners in our countries. And you have Faheem and Gaussian today who are just great partners in these countries who are very connected with the local organizations to help us give that information to the public and local organizations to lower air quality and make air quality more healthy. And of course, we're also working with countries and partner countries to help achieve action plans. There are action plans in many countries, and we'd also like to bring to bear some of the expertise from the United States and what we know from here. I don't want to go much into the detail, but this has been really difficult. We probably have 30 to 40 people working on this project collectively amongst our partners and graduate students. And I just want to say that, and I think probably Nishan, who runs an organization like Verité, can say organizing things and getting the right people together and being efficient with time is really important. So what our map, soon we'll have roughly 350 sensors deployed at all of our partner countries. You can see our partner countries here. You can look at, this is Lucknow, India. Right now we have almost 60 to 70 sensors in Lucknow, India. we're using a sensor called the TSI Blue Sky sensor. I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. But one thing I would say is in each country, the objectives are a little bit different depending on the country partners. So we heard today, in some cases in our countries, I'll mention that in a minute, people want to better understand urban areas. It might be Dhaka. Often we've done a lot of studies. I have also done studies in places like New Delhi. But in a place like Nepal, our partners in Nepal are very interested in looking at the transboundary transport. We heard about that. So not only are we setting up sensors in Kathmandu, which has been somewhat studied well, but we're also setting them up at border areas. And so far we've found that those areas are very polluted and have sometimes higher concentrations than in Kathmandu, surprisingly. And you heard this, I won't go on about this, but this is the TSI Blue Sky sensor. I'll show you that in a minute. This is on the x-axis, that is a reference monitor. It's what we call the federal equivalent method. On the y-axis, you have the sensors that we use, and our partners use many different ways to calibrate these sensors. I won't go into details. I've done a lot of work on the calibration of these sensors, and we've written lots of papers about how to calibrate these sensors, and you heard how important that is, and that is extremely important. One thing I wanted to mention, I popped this in a few minutes ago, and I tend not to do that. So you have the calibrations of the sensors. These are a bunch of sensors that were in Delhi, and all I want to say is what's super important is you can calibrate the sensors, but there's a couple things. The calibrations change over time, depending. They tend not to change too much, but it does depend on the mix of aerosols. The sensors can drift and become uncalibrated. And I just want to mention there are methods to do sensor surveillance and make sure the sensors are working right and potentially recalibrate them. This is called the Gaussian process regression model. We use that in India already. And I wanted to just say that that's a really important thing as well, but it's very much a computer science problem, or a computer science solution. And so there are a lot of these things out there, and I'll mention those as part of my theme before the end of the talk again. So, for example, I just want to show you, so this is Dhaka's sensor network, and I apologize, it's kind of fuzzy on the right there. This is Abdus Salam, our partner in Dhaka. And you can see what's interesting is these are two traces over the month of February of PM 2.5. On the bottom, you see that blue line, and then on the top, you see the red one. And these are using pairs of sort of rural and more urban background concentrations. And you can see right away what you can imagine. You can integrate this with meteorology. There's a lot of information showing what the local versus regional sources are. And that's one of the things. Our networks are just up and running. They're not fully running yet, and soon we'll be integrating with some meteorology and trying to give some important information on the local versus regional effects. And I would imagine doing the same thing in Sri Lanka, you can figure out what's coming in, or what sources, or what contribution is from Sri Lanka, and what contributions are being imported in Sri Lanka from other places. One thing I want to mention, and I want to mention is and Ranil mentioned this, I think he gave a great summary of the pros and cons of using satellites. We've developed a new satellite approach, and this is a map of Delhi on the left, and on the right, this is a hotspots in Delhi. What we do is you can look at that on the top. Oh, I got it right here. You can see this right going on the top bar. We use the images. We're using satellites, the Planet Lab satellites, 3-meter resolution satellites. And you can train the satellites with this and just use the images, and this skips the whole process of trying to use more complex radiation measurements and then scaling that to PM 2.5. Oops. And so what we're going to do is use this new methodology. Again, it's a machine learning methodology. We work with some machine learning experts, and we feel like this is potentially a real revolutionary thing that can also be used over Sri Lanka. And the thing that's really interesting about this is you look at the top, these are images, the top bar here. These are the hottest spots. These are roughly neighborhood level hotspots because these satellites have higher resolution. Oh, sorry, I'm moving my mouse here as I'm talking, sorry. Have much higher resolution than the sort of, the typical satellites that have a kilometer resolution. So merging this, training this with sensor networks, it's going to be able to get this right thing here, this right image. These are the local neighborhood hotspots. And it's kind of interesting. I won't talk about this, but you see that the top are the hotspots in neighborhoods and the bottoms are some of the cool spots. And you can just tell that the urban form is a lot different. And that's something that gives us a lot of information on air pollution exposure as well. So the combination of and I think Ranil's theme would probably be the same. I think the combination of the low-cost sensor networks that are maintained, calibrated, and surveyed well, or surveillance is used on them to make sure that we trust their data. Combining that with satellite data, this is a real new method, so I can't say it's going to 100% sure work over Sri Lanka. I can think of reasons it might not, but these two things together are super powerful. And one thing I wanted to mention is that the way I see this problem, and I know Sarat had mentioned this, and they were all great points about lots of data coming in. And to me, without talking about that problem, I think Sarat and Ranil both appreciate how intense this is with all this data. And I think this is a real data analytics problem. And I think that to solve this problem, I think, and maybe everybody understands, we have to get true computer scientists and true computer science experts, and then bringing to bear all these revolutionary changes in AI. I think that us air pollution scientists can make a real big difference in air quality. But I think we're in the era now where we have so much data that we have to have super experts in data analytics, and that is, I think, crucial to our project as well. I just want to say a couple things. This is a small fraction of our team. We do lots of management. We have a lot of Zoom calls amongst our project management team, and it's been really fun. We have great partners. It's been a really important part of our project, and we're probably about a third of the way through our project. Really started late, about a year into it or so, and so far we're really excited about it. And also I'm really excited after hearing what's going on in Sri Lanka, because I know we have lots of things we can all work on together. I was really impressed with the plant tower sensor network that is going in Sri Lanka, and I know Ranil is making measurements as well. And I think we can all work together and really make something really unique and exciting. Okay, we have lots of webinars that do training. For example, we have webinars on machine learning. We have webinars on data analytics of our team, trying to get everybody on the same track. And as of course, I think, and Ranil and Nishan and Sarat can imagine, trying to get a lot of people together to do data analytics all at the same time is not too easy, but I think so far we're doing okay. And I think I want to keep it at that. And we're talking about sources. It's just a picture from the Maldives. That bottom right image is one of the Planet Lab images showing the power of using Planet Labs to see plumes. And of course, we're also going to do a bunch of sort of analyses to try to figure out what the specific sources are. So I think I'd like to stop there. I'm at about 12 minutes, and feel free to put any questions in the chat. And I look forward to to talking more and working with people in Sri Lanka. I think it would be really fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. That was a great overview of the regional project that's going on. And I'd ask the audience to hold their questions to the end of the session.
Okay.
I would like to introduce, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gayan Bowatha, who will talk about the Sri Lankan component of this project. So a little bit about Gayan. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Peradeniya, that's up in the central part of Sri Lanka. He obtained his doctorate in epidemiology in 2016 from the University of Melbourne in Australia. After his PhD, he worked as a postdoctoral fellow funded by the Centre for Energy and Health Research in Australia. He's also affiliated with the University of Melbourne and the National Institute of Fundamental Studies in Sri Lanka, and has published more than 65 peer-reviewed journal articles. His research interests lie in monitoring and modeling air pollution and exploring the effects of air pollution exposure and human health. He has done studies investigating the effects of long-term and short-term exposure of air pollution on respiratory diseases using cohort studies. And his studies are also focused to evaluate the effects of green environments on human health, including international consortia involving Australia, European countries, and North America. His current research projects include investigating indoor air pollution and respiratory diseases in rural communities of Sri Lanka. And he has 2 projects aimed at monitoring and modeling ambient PM2.5 in Sri Lankan cities. Gayan, over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Great. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So there's some echoing is going on. Not sure why. Okay, I'll turn off this one. Okay, I'll share my screen.
It's not in presenter view. Well, it is in presenter view. It's not in full screen view, Gayan.
Okay, I will put it into. Great.
Yeah, perfect. Good.
Yeah, give me a second. Okay, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share some experience, what we are doing in Sri Lanka in terms of monitoring and modeling air pollution. So today, I'm going to talk about some experience that we are having for the last couple of years. So I'm kind of like new to Sri Lanka and to do some air pollution work. Started my work maybe 3 years back in Sri Lanka. So all the work are not that well experienced up to now. So we are trying to do some initiate some work to do in Sri Lanka, especially as Mike said. So I closely work with Mike and his team related to Blue Sky project, where we're going to establish a large network of small sensors. So in this small talk today, I'm going to highlight, or I'm going to share some of my experiences in a different project that we have been conducting since the last 3 years related to monitoring and modeling air pollution using small sensor network. So we all, as humans, we have a right to breathe clean air. So it's a fundamental human right. If you can think about world scenario, every minute a child dies of illness caused by air pollution. And not only child, every minute 10 adults die prematurely because of dirty air that they inhale during their lifetime. If we take into account the gravity of the disastrous situations that the air pollution can cause, maybe 5 million deaths annually caused by air pollution. If we can sum up to, that's more than people die from war, murder, car accidents, plane crashes, malaria, tuberculosis, HIV or AIDS, and Ebola combined. So you can get the gravity of the air pollution in the global level. However, in Sri Lanka, air pollution is a neglected health issue. We don't care about much about air pollution when it comes to our health. There may be different reasons. We may have different other priorities. There may be other economic and social barriers as well. There are some interest in newspapers, and some of the researchers are doing some work, but as I can see, we can develop a lot. We can do more to improve, or first to understand the air quality in Sri Lanka, then to apply measures to control air pollution, to bring our citizens, to provide our citizens better atmosphere and reduce the burden on the health system related to the air pollution. There are several challenges in air pollution monitoring in Sri Lanka, especially when it comes to the standard monitoring stations. Main thing is the high cost. The equipments are really high in cost, and the nation like Sri Lanka, a developing nation, it may not have the full capacity to purchase these high-end equipments. And the maintenance cost is also very high for these equipments. And we may not have higher level technical expertise in our country to maintain these monitors in a healthy working condition. Those are some of the challenges. The photo in the right hand side top corner, it shows the air pollution monitoring station located in Kandy, operated by the Central Environmental Authority. And the graph shows in the bottom right hand corner, I took it from the CEA website. It's the time series of PM 2.5 in Kandy and Colombo in the year of 2019. You can see that in Kandy, there are a lot of missing data. So that's the real issue that we face. So we have this high-end equipment, but it's a problem whether we are getting the maximum out of these high standard monitoring stations. So, and a recent newspaper article, very recent one, air quality monitoring stations defunct. So these high-end monitors, with the current maybe economic situation going on in Sri Lanka, we may not have enough funds to maintain this high-cost sensors, high-cost monitoring station. So we are having these challenges, how we can overcome these. Maybe small sensors, what we have learned from many of the other speakers, may be a solution. So having that in our mind, we started a small project in Kandy to monitor air pollution using a small sensor network. So we call them koalas, which means knowing our ambient local air quality. This was developed by the Queensland University of Technology in Australia. We have a close collaboration with Professor Lydia Morosco, who is a world-leading expert in air pollution monitoring and modeling. So these are small sensors, and it's low cost, and to a certain level, they are reliable and they are small in size. We are mainly focused on particulate matter because if you read the literature and what is the current understanding is that the measures coming out of small sensors, particulate matters are more reliable compared to the other air pollutants in the atmosphere. So these units are solar powered sensors. So we don't need to put any batteries, or we don't need to connect to the main grid system. So they are solar powered. So that's really good. And they can monitor real time air pollution, and they upload the real time data into a cloud server. And we can visualize the real-time data as well. The smart thing having in these koala sensors is it has an inbuilt SIM card which can communicate directly. We don't need to have Wi-Fi, it has the cellular connection. So some of our findings, we did monitoring in several locations in Kandy. So what we observed is that we see mainly two peaks of air pollution in Kandy, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, or maybe in the evening. So this is related to the peak traffic hours in the morning time and the peak traffic time in the evening times. So the levels, they are very high. If we are going to talk about comparing the WHO standards, so these are the standards, the daily and the annual standards. So everything is very high. Sometimes if we can make them into a daily average or annual average, we won't see these kind of like peaks in the morning and afternoon. However, this is the most important period of exposure, talking about most of the children, they are exposed to these high level during their school time. So that's what actual exposure. If we're going to take the daily or annual average, that wouldn't explain the total picture in this air pollution, especially related to Kandy. And we did some analysis looking at the long-term air pollution levels in Kandy, as you can see here in this time series plot. As some of our speakers said, in Sri Lanka, we experience high level of air pollution in latter part of the year and early part of the year, mainly due to the air pollution coming from the subcontinent. That's what we can hypothesize, but I don't think that has been very thoroughly studied as well. But during the monsoon period, we are having relatively low air pollution levels. And from these sensors, we could capture some of the incidences, air pollution incidences happened in the Sri Lanka, especially in Kandy. 2019, there was a very high alert in the news as well. 2019 November, high air pollution came from the subcontinent. So we would be able to capture from our sensors as well. And this is a photo from my house. So this is on a top, the picture on the top. It's on a clear day. We can see the clearly mountains far away, but this is on the air pollution, high air pollution level that was happened in 2019. You can see how the worst situation here in Kandy. And we didn't stop there. We wanted to explore the air pollution levels and how it's going to affect the health of the people in Kandy as well. So this is, as I said, a very early stage of our research. But using the existing data, we wanted to look at how the PM2.5 exposure and it's going to affect the respiratory disease hospitalization in Kandy. So we got the data from Kandy and Verité Hospital, and we linked them with our monitoring data. And we found out that we take all respiratory diseases in the year of 2019, there was a 21% increase of respiratory diseases due to PM2.5 exposure. And we looked at the other specific diseases in males and females, and different types of respiratory diseases, and we found that there's a high level of hospitalization due to PM 2.5 exposure. And now coming to the next part of the project, that's the building a land use regression model for Kandy using these small sensors. We have selected 27 locations, right? And based on their geographic and the land use in Kandy, and then we put up the sensors and we did the monitoring campaign in 3 phases throughout 1 year. We selected to build the model, we selected a priori defined predictor variables to fit into the land use regression model. And the land use regression model, we use a standard linear regression. We use that to develop a LUR model that can be best predict the measured concentration. So the model building is not yet fully completed. However, in our initial analysis, we have found out that some of the predictive variables can best explain the air pollution in Kandy. So we are still working on this model. It's not a fully developed model yet. So what we're going to do in future after building the model, we are going to evaluate the robustness and the reliability of the model using leave one out cross-section validation and produce the final model. So as you know that we do a lot of air pollution monitoring to a certain level in Sri Lanka. However, building an air pollution model would be challenging with the lack of data that we have. So it would be true that we have a lot of monitoring data, but when it comes to other variable, it's challenging. So this is the initial project that we started to monitor and model air pollution in Kandy. And now we work with Mike and we learn a lot from Mike's project to how to monitor and model air pollution. So Mike explained a lot about that project. So that project is going on in Sri Lanka. Hopefully in future we can get more strong results from his project as well. Some concluding remarks. So the small sensors may be a solution for air pollution monitoring in low resource settings like in Sri Lanka. However, when using low cost air pollution sensors, we need to consider the accuracy and the reliability of these sensors. And the calibration and validation of the these sensors are essential. And we need to be cautious about when interpreting the results from these sensors, because sometimes these sensors can produce very high or very low results that could be mislead the decision-taking parties. And maybe combination with advanced technology and advanced statistical methods could generate more reliable results using these small sensor networks. Thank you, everyone, for listening to my talk. And if there are any questions, I would like to take them now. Thank you.
Actually, Gayan, thank you for that. Let's hold our questions till Dr. Kokar has finished, and then we'll have questions for all 3 panelists. So thank you, Gayan. That was very interesting. I really look forward to seeing the results of your LUR model with the cross-validation, especially that combined with all the low-cost sensors and satellite data. That would be very interesting and most likely to be very accurate. So looking forward to that. But before we get into that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Mohammad Faheem Kokar. I believe you're based in Islamabad. Professor Kokar is working as the head of department at the Institute of Environmental Science and Engineering, School of Civil and Environmental Engineering, National University of Science and Technology in Pakistan. His doctoral degree from Germany, followed by 3 postdoctorates from Germany and France. He excelled in the field of satellite remote sensing, air quality monitoring, and assessment, climate change and its impacts, differential optical absorption spectroscopy techniques, and data retrieval algorithms. At IESE, Dr. Kokar is the team leader of C-Cargo, which stands for Climate Change and Atmospheric Chemistry Research Group. He's motivated to explore the atmospheric composition over Pakistan and to prepare regional databases of several greenhouse and trace gases by exploiting both satellite and ground-based observations. Very interesting work. He has a commendable research record and was conferred the SCEE Best Researcher Award for the year 2020 and 21. Focus of his research includes climate change impacts, mitigation and adaptation, and air quality monitoring and assessment. So, Dr. Kokar, we are very grateful to you for making time to be with us, and we look forward to hearing about your contributions to this project.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Am I audible?
Yes.
Let me share my screen. My screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind introduction. And I would like to also thank you, Mike and Dan, for setting the stage and making my job a bit easier, and setting foundation for the role of local sensors, particularly in this time of the century that we have as an emerging field and doing a lot of great jobs, but still they have a lot of challenges that local sensors are actually underestimated in various parts. So primarily I will focus on the air pollution scenario of Pakistan, what are actually the sources, the challenges, what we are facing here in Pakistan regarding to air pollution. And then I would like to talk about the role and challenges of local sensors in air pollution scenario of Pakistan. So I would like to skip
Dr. Kokar, you're a bit muffled. Is it possible to move a little closer to the microphone? It's a bit hard to hear you very clearly.
Let me change my move this here. Actually, I was using just what I need to use. Is that okay now?
Oh yes, much better. We cannot see your slides though.
I'll do that. The visible.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay, can you please? I'm just. Okay, so this is kind of outline that I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. So actually start with the South Asian air pollution scenario, particularly when we talk about air pollution scenario of South Asia. So if you look at this picture, very interesting findings. And here you see on the x-axis, it's annual averages of PM2.5 concentrations. And this is the weighted population data that is actually exposed to most of the air pollution, PM2.5 air pollution. And the to reach the safe limits, although they have been revised recently again. But if you look at the population of South Asian country, particularly in India here in this, and Bangladesh and then Pakistan. So most of the population is actually exposed to higher particulate matter pollution. And that problem has been so pervasive that many studies published recently, they have termed this pollution as a fifth season in the country. South Asia accounts for around 32% of the world's mortality due to highly exposed to the particulate matter pollution. And the economic damages incurred as a result of this bad air quality are actually huge. Sorry for this. I thought there is some issues with the. Am I audible now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, it might the whole thing is getting a little choppy. So shall we just keep your video off for a little while and then you can turn it back on when you're done presenting?
Yeah, I guess I have already turned off. I guess it will be fine now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry for this inconvenience, but okay. Let me start again. So if we talk about air pollution scenario, Pakistan, so Pakistan is reported consistently in the top 5 countries with the bad air quality. For instance, here the recent report that Pakistan was on second number. And if you look here, the 2020 average and the 2019 average and 2018, last 3 years, that has been quite consistently, they were quite bad. And they were unhealthy level in Pakistan. So here, due to well, it's like Islamabad is like the most, and number 11, the most polluted capitals in the world. So if we talk about other cities like Karachi, Lahore, Faisalabad, Rawalpindi, Peshawar, so they have been also exposed to very high or unhealthy pollution levels, particularly Lahore, Faisalabad, they have the air pollution level goes to a hazardous level as well. And so most of the cities, including experience severe air pollution episodes from October to February, and the very persistent smog events during October and November months, and during the winter month as well. So what are actually the air pollution related issues in Pakistan? They are quite common in this region. There have been frequent smog, not only during the winter, but also during the pre-monsoon season of during the months of October and November as well. And especially during the summer, there have been increasing heat wave numbers in some part of the country as well, which have been very frequent. A lot, the air pollution is not just consistent to these 2 episodic phenomena, but it's throughout the year, it's quite bad, and the people's health is quite at stake. So the challenges Pakistan is facing related to air quality. The biggest challenge in our country is that we are lacking having a proper functional air quality monitoring network, a lack of emission inventories, a lack of homogeneity in the published data. Whatever the monitoring is done, it's quite scarce and intermittent. And the published data has a lot of question about inaccuracy, about accuracy. And the other biggest challenge is weak regional cooperation because this region, particularly Indo-Gangetic Plains, they have common airshed and they experience common air pollution problem as well. But due to some geopolitical differences, this region experienced huge weak regional cooperation and collaborative effort to abate air quality issues in the region. And the other challenge we face in Pakistan is a non-existent of data sharing policy or practices and lack of transboundary studies particularly. So these challenges could be an opportunity because recently awareness about air quality related issues among the masses have been increased very much, but it also could act as a weaknesses as well because most of so most of the time their collaborative efforts are actually unaddressed. So, but still, it could be an opportunity for the regional cooperation. If we couldn't utilize this cooperation, these opportunities, it could be another new point of conflict in the region as well. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. I'll keep checking otherwise because I'm not that much confident my internet connection is still going on or not. So if you look at worldwide air quality monitoring networks, they are quite extensive in the western part of the world, in the Europe, and in some part of Asia as well. But if you look at the South Asia, especially over Pakistan, hardly any monitoring facilities are available. There is another, like in the lower picture, you see again very few. This is Aeronet monitoring station, but very few monitoring facilities are available. But in contrary, if you look at the pollution hotspot in the South Asia is actually is among the very hotspot of the pollution, not for only particulate matter, but for other gases like CO, carbon monoxide, NO2, and SO2 as well. So here comes the role of satellite remote sensing, keeping in view the current scenario and data scarcity in Pakistan. Satellite remote sensing can bridge this gap to a certain extent, but again, this can be a qualitative assessment, but it's not going to give us a complete holistic picture of the issue at very fine or city level or at point source level. The satellite instruments are contributing towards improving our understanding in both spatial and temporal variation. They can be equally used for characterization of aerosols and gases, meteorological observations, aerosols and cloud interaction, so source identification at both the regional and global scale. So for instance, recently the smoke episodes that have been very pervasive since 2016 onward. So here I gave you the satellite remote sensing that has effectively monitored this. What you see here in this picture in the background is aerosol optical depth that was monitored by MODIS instrument. And similarly, the MODIS has capacity to monitor the active fire counts, which are the red dots here. And if you look at here, this is comparison between ground and the satellite observations of aerosol optical depth during the November 2016. And this is the city of Lahore in Pakistan, and this is international border, India and Pakistan. And that these different colors lines are representing the back trajectory analysis that is actually ending up at Lahore, and they were run back in time. Very interesting feature. So whenever the trajectories were passing over fire hotspot east side of the international border, so the Lahore was experiencing quite high level of AOD. For instance, here, the 1st of November in the blue color, 2nd of November, the yellow color, and the green color, 3rd of November, and the 4th of November was the red color. And when the trajectories were coming from inland, so they have substantially reduced.
Yeah, Dr. Kokar, we have 2 more minutes. Can you please plan to wrap up in the next 2 minutes so we have time for questions?
Okay, so we have this. We keep using remote sensing, satellite remote sensing data for all the years till 2020, and the similar things were happening. So, although satellites have quite huge advantages, but they have several constraints as well because of accuracy. The information is averaged over larger ground pixel size, and they are unable to capture small scale variation. Intermittent monitoring once per day in high capital and operational costs. And however, here comes the role of low cost sensors, and they could be effectively used to bridge this gap. They are lightweight, they're easy to deploy, they're less expensive, and particularly in the air pollution scenario of Pakistan, they could be very advantageous the use of low-cost sensors. I skipped this because Mike in Gaussian has already spoke about, so we're working part of this project. Because primarily on this, the challenges the use of low-cost sensors have been. The biggest challenge is actually the accuracy and the calibration of these sensors. Wide-scale application more clear in this field has resulted in substantially improved accuracy. For instance, particularly PM2.5, that has been reached more than 90%. Another challenge related to low-cost sensor is actually the multitude of data. So they can be deployed at finer spatial scale, but they produce a lot of data. So data handling could be an issue or challenge. Lifetime of low-cost sensor, because though you have to replace on an annual basis or a frequent basis. Acceptability, this is the biggest challenge here in Pakistan because huge resistance. The regulability of low-cost sensor because of lack of capacity at regulatory authority, lack of certification from World Organization, and there are a lot of myths about the accuracy of low-cost sensor. They are not accurate, and so then large-scale applicability by generic agents. They're using general agents. They using as a pressure to motivate regulatory authority, but they're not ready to accept. Just give you a quick example. They recently deployed low-cost sensor, and we compare against the conventional method of ban, and they're quite consistent and promising results are there. With another set of comparison with nephelometer, and if you look at, they're quite good, and it's more than 90%. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kokar. Thank you to all the speakers again. It's now time to take some questions, and I have gotten a few questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with a question for, I think, both Mike and Gaussian. Panelists, could you please keep your cameras on? Unless, I don't know, Dr. Kokar, if your video is too choppy, then it's okay to turn it off, but we would prefer if when you're speaking, at least you turn it on. So the first question for Mike and Gaussian, based on your research, what are the challenges, data information gaps of understanding exposure and pollutant and impact to public health in, this question is just about Sri Lanka, but I should say South Asia.
Can I say something real quick, and then Gaussian can chime in also? So yeah, so I think the first step, I think truly the most important thing is to understand exposure. So I think the first step is to understand the spatial outdoor concentrations, and because people spend a certain amount of time outdoors, but we also know indoors the concentrations are often related to the outdoor concentration, and it depends what the indoor sources are. But I think the next step in all of this is to also make some personal, well, I think the monitors are coming out soon, but I think we need to make personal exposure measurements soon to complement the outdoor concentrations. And then I think the combination of the personal exposure monitors and understanding what that relationship is to the spatial distribution of outdoor air is going to make us to make much, much better estimates of the health impacts. So it's got to be personal exposure monitoring. And then I know Gaussian showed the estimates of the total number of, and you saw estimates of total number of people who are getting sick. And I think those will be revised much different once we understand the relationship between the outdoor concentrations and personal exposure. So that's kind of my feeling about it. Gaussian, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Ranil and Mike. Yeah, so I totally agree with Mike's point that the most important thing is to understand the exposure first. So without knowing the exposures, we can't predict any health outcomes. So that's the bottom line. So when it comes to monitoring, so we can do a certain level of monitoring, but then when it comes to modeling, you know that we cannot rely on only the monitoring data to build a model. So we need to, for example, if I'm taking my project as an example, we need to build a land use regression model. So we need to feed in a lot of variables into the model to actually understand which variables are going to predict the air pollution level. So it's really challenging, starting from, you know, the amount of vehicles in the road, meteorology, everything. It's really hard to get that data. And if we can find a platform where we can put all those information into a single platform, that would be really helpful. At least we can link up the different departments or different government agencies who's working on these things, and at least some direction. That would be fantastic for these kind of projects.
Thank you. There is a follow-up question about the LUR modeling, but I'd first like to pose a different question to Dr. Kokar. This is for you, Dr. Kokar. Understanding that Lahore has some of the worst air pollution in the world, how is the government trying to tackle the issue? Is it by tackling it at the source point? And what are the challenges of implementing those policies?
Okay. Well, thank you for this very important question. So because we are experiencing smog issues since 2016 on continuous basis, and the government of Punjab in Pakistan has taken several measures, and but still the issue is pervasive and it's increasing day by day. The time span of the smog episode is increasing, and it's becoming part of and the intensity of smoke is also increasing. So the answer to that is, I mean, whatever the efforts they have put, it's inadequate because they don't know that in the absence of having a properly coordinating network, you cannot actually gauge what is the magnitude of your problem and where to actually put the effort, and the effort you have put in, whether they have been effective or not. Actually. So this is actually the biggest challenge. They have taken several measures, but the problem is still going on. Unless you characterize and fully understand your issue and the magnitude, you are unable to go for an adequate policy measures or abatement strategies. Rightly mentioned by Gyan as well, that means they can be very instrumental for policy making and devising and interlinking various stakeholders, particularly different government agencies, to characterize their problem and go for an adequate and effective air pollution abatement strategies.
Thank you. So, I mean, the interconnectedness of this raises the question, you know, if one city's or one country's pollution control methods are inadequate, of course, the local population is the one that bears the brunt of it. But what about the transboundary pollution also? You know, from very polluted areas, there's going to be outflows to other neighboring areas. I guess the question then is maybe to Mike, you know, being the person who's handling this Duke project, are you going to be monitoring and trying to attribute transboundary movement of pollution as well? I know it's a difficult and a touchy subject, but is that something that you are going to be attempting to do?
I think in the State Department project, we're letting our local partners decide which questions they want to answer, whether it's what is the highly localized pollution in a big urban area like Lucknow, India, or so in that case in India, the idea is, you know, in India, what is the regional versus local influence of cities in India like Delhi? That's been a subject that has been debated a lot because, for example, you know, it looks like maybe if 60% of the pollution comes from outside of Delhi, the people in Delhi trying to decrease air pollution don't have a lot of leverage to really decrease the air pollution that much because they're only responsible for 40% of their air quality. But some other countries, for example, in Bangladesh and in Nepal, the idea is to look at more of this transboundary pollution. I think it's not an easy problem. I think the sensors are going to help us with the satellite data. But I also think the crazy, and you know, I think Ranil, I would say just looking, you know, at your, you know, look over the embassy data and looking at the sort of, you know, more or less the mean annual concentrations at the embassies, you start to get a little bit of a feel for the transboundary transport, you know, just with that data itself. So I think that the sensor networks locally help out for regional influence, and certainly if they're placed correctly, they can help out for transboundary pollution as well. So. I guess the answer is in some cases yes, in some cases no. But you know, we still don't know how well those estimates are going to work and what their uncertainty is going to be. So we're hoping to learn about that.
Yeah, thank you. So back to Dr. Kokar about this is branching out a little bit. into the climate change part of it. One of the questions is that we understand that you do research on climate change impacts. How are you using quality data? So, sorry, I think there's some background noise there. Let me repeat the question, Dr. Kokar. So since you work on climate change impacts, how are you using air quality data to understand the impacts of climate change? You mentioned an increase in the number of heat waves. How is air pollution connected to heat waves and in turn climate change? Did you get that question, Dr. Kokar?
Yeah, my call was dropped. I couldn't get the question. Can you please repeat it again?
Sure. So the question is basically you're working on climate change. What are the impacts? How are you using air quality data to understand the impacts of climate change? You mentioned the increase of number of heat waves. How is air pollution connected to heat waves and then climate change?
Well, it's a kind of win-win situation. If you improve air quality, that is going to help in climate change as well, because recently we have quite huge global warming issues and some sort of, particularly when we remove air pollution, then black carbon could be a proxy for that. If you could remove not just the criteria pollutant, but all set of pollutants that going to help, and that can help. And similarly, the recent studies, which are quite preliminary, they're having new findings about the moving NOx is not just a solution. It can trigger the formation of ground level ozone, but this is quite preliminary, and which is the ozone is very important because it's not just a criteria pollutant, but also greenhouse gas as well. So we need to identify a trade-off between them so that we can actually benefit from not only for the air quality, but also for the climate change and global warming as well.
Okay, thank you. I would like to pose the same question to the other two, but unfortunately we are short of time. So I'm going to ask the last question of Mike and Guyan. Can you please elaborate a little bit on the LUR modeling and the methods that you're hoping to use? For instance, how do you integrate traffic data? What's the source of this data? And can that technique be used elsewhere? I know you were testing it out in Kandy, but what about other places, not just in Sri Lanka, but anywhere in the region?
Oh, go ahead, Guyan.
In the model that we
You're
are
muted.
currently...
Okay, good.
Okay, yeah, so the current model that we are working on, as I said, that we don't have much data to fit into the models. So how are we going to tackle the traffic, especially what you're thinking of incorporating the main road, identifying the main road, major roads based on their traffic load and categorize them into different levels and fit into the model. That's the only option that we can have, unfortunately, because we don't have the road level, how many diesel vehicles are moving, how many trucks are there, how many cars are running. So we don't have that fine level detail when it comes to traffic data. For the bigger project, the U.S. State Department funded project, we are trying to get some traffic counters and put there and to get those information in the road level. So it's again challenging because we have huge number of roads. Getting the data is really challenging. So that's about it. And the other data, we have some meteorological data that we can get, but the other data like land use and those kind of things that we can get from the survey department, kind of like those places. Then to fill the gap, I think that's why the Mike is more interested in using satellite imagery to fill some of the gaps that we are facing in this type of modeling. Mike?
Yeah, I guess in the grand scheme, I think you summed it up good. I think, or summed it up well. I think we'd like to use satellites to fill in the gaps, but of course, as Ranil said, the weakness is you just get one snapshot per day. But I think we aggregate data together And then we can start seeing over multi-days what the spatial distribution of air quality is. And then, as I also said, I mean, I think I was hoping that we're going to get neighborhood level hotspots, and that this is something we're going to learn how to communicate with people to make the air quality better. You know, the problem, as we know, is, and you know, I think Ranil knows as well, is the roadsides. You can be within a few meters of a roadside, and the concentration can be, you know, a factor of 10 than being 5 to 10 meters away from the road. It's pretty amazing. Things dilute really fast, but proximity to road can really crank up really high exposures, and those are hard to estimate. It's hard to put sensors in those locations, and they don't last very long in those locations for many reasons. So that's a good question, and particularly if the roads are indeed the sources, then it often becomes somewhat difficult to get the true exposures. That's why I think it probably, the reality of it is to get maybe real exposures is we need to start using personal exposure monitors with people and finding out what how their activities relate to their exposure and what the true on-road exposures are.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I would love to go into this discussion a little more in detail, talk about the possibility of getting Google traffic data and all that. But I believe one of the speakers who's going to be here tomorrow is doing that in India. So maybe we can pick his brains about it. But that's anyway. Let me, on that note, unfortunately, we're going to have to call it quits for today. But let me just throw in a plug for tomorrow. We're having 2 sessions just like this. The first one will be on the challenges of improving air quality, the health and social aspects of poor air quality. And then the second session after a break, we're going to be talking about some of the tools used to communicate air quality, some wildfire smoke messaging in the US, which is a big concern in the Western United States where I live. And then the direct applications to techniques like that that can be directly applied to contexts within South Asia. So we're going to have some speakers discussing those tomorrow. So I invite you all to join again. I believe the links are the same. Oh no, I'm sorry. The links are in your registration. So thank you once again to our speakers and panelists, and for the thoughtful questions from the audience. Much appreciated. We will hope to see you virtually tomorrow. So unless there's anything else from Verité for the good of the order, I think we are adjourned for today.